The price of my life's work was $2 million. At least, that was the number my father announced as he slid the termination contract across the table. He, my mother, and my sister saw it as a neat and tidy end to my expensive hobby. What they didn't see was the phone in my pocket vibrating with a third, urgent email from the U.S. Patent Office. Their $2 million write-off had just received an opening bid of $3.7 billion, and the man they were about to fire was about to become their new boss. The silence that followed his declaration was broken only by the chime of a fork against porcelain. Our Sunday dinners were always like this. Carefully staged performances of family unity where the air was thick with the tension of a hostile negotiation. Across from me, my sister, Olivia, a vision of polished success, offered a small, satisfied smile. My mother, impeccably poised, adjusted the gold at her throat, their luster reflecting the cold light of the chandelier. My laptop bag, heavy with the true sum of my efforts, was propped against my chair. It was a singularity of potential, waiting to collapse the hollow world around it. For 5 years, I had been sequestered in a Bennett Tech sub-basement, chasing a breakthrough my family dismissed. This quantum stability algorithm was my obsession, my singular focus, the work that I hoped would finally prove I was more than just the other Bennett child, the quiet scientist overshadowed by my sister's flashy corporate wins. I stared at the document, the ink of the Bennett Tech logo stark against the white paper. My father leaned back, swirling his Bordeaux, assuming my silence was acceptance. "It's for the best, Ethan," my mother said softly, as if consoling a child. "Your sister's division generates actual revenue." "By rebranding existing technologies," I muttered. "By generating revenue," Olivia countered, her voice sharp and cold. It was a branding issue. A basement lab doesn't exactly scream innovation. My father's patience was wearing thin. "Sign the transfer agreement, Ethan. It's a formality, but a necessary one. The deal with Global Dynamics is done." He pushed a pen toward me. "Welcome to the real world." I stared at the pen lying between us. It was the same Mont Blanc he'd used to sign my college acceptance check, his signature looping like a chain around everything he controlled. For years, that pen had built empires for him and erased dreams for me. I remembered being 12, showing him a crude circuit I'd soldered together from scrap parts. It sparked to life on the kitchen counter, a little blue LED blinking in triumph. "It's unstable," he'd said, without looking up from his newspaper. "Build something that lasts." That phrase had followed me through every sleepless night in that windowless lab. Build something that lasts. Not for him, but in spite of him. Across the table, Olivia was pretending not to watch me. I knew that look, the gleam of someone who thought she'd already won. The same expression she wore when she'd stolen credit for my early encryption designs. My pulse steadied. The pen wasn't power anymore. It was just ink and metal. What mattered sat in my laptop bag at my feet. 5 years of data, the sum of my solitude. I wasn't signing away my work. Not tonight. Just as my hand reached for the pen, my phone vibrated in my pocket. Under normal circumstances, I would have ignored it. But the timing felt like fate intervening. I pulled it out. The lock screen showed 3 unread notifications from the United States Patent and Trademark Office, each marked with a red exclamation point for urgency. My heart hammered against my ribs as I unlocked the phone. I opened the first email. Patent number 609384, Quantum Stability Algorithm, approved. I opened the second. Breakthrough Technology Designation, granted. The third email made the air leave my lungs. Subject, Initial Acquisition Bids. Per your representative's instructions, we have opened the initial bidding window. Opening offer received from a consortium, $3.7 billion US dollars. My fork slipped from my grasp, clattering loudly against the china. I looked up at my father, who was watching me with an impatient frown, his Mont Blanc pen held ready. "Ethan, don't be dramatic," he said. "Welcome to the real world. Sign the paper." A slow, calm smile spread across my face. It must have been unnerving, because my mother shifted in her seat. I turned my phone and placed it gently on the table in front of him, the screen illuminated with the third email. "That's funny," I said, my voice unnaturally quiet. "Because it seems the real world disagrees with your valuation." Vehemently. The pen dropped from his hand, leaving a stark black slash of ink across the pristine white document. My mother gasped. Olivia's wine glass froze midair, her eyes wide with disbelief. 3.7 million, she whispered, the number a foreign concept on her tongue. Billion, I corrected softly. With a B. And that's merely the opening bid. My father's face went from authoritative to ashen in a heartbeat. He lunged for the ink-stained transfer agreement, but I was faster, plucking it from the table. This. I held it up. This is worthless. The patents were filed under my name, not Bennett Tech's. You can't do that, he sputtered, his voice cracking. The company funded your lab, your equipment. No, I stated plainly. Bennett Tech provided the space. A line item in the facility's budget. Every piece of equipment, every salary for my small team, every patent filing fee was paid for by the trust fund Grandma Harper left me. You remember? You advised me to save it for something important. So I did. The room fell into a silence, so profound I could hear the faint hum of the servers in the West Wing. My phone buzzed again. I glanced down without picking it up. A new message preview glowed on the screen. Google has entered the bidding. Offer is now for billion. I looked back at my stunned family. You wanted to sell my work for 2 million, I said, my voice devoid of the anger that had simmered for years. It was now cold, hard fact. Let me show you what you almost threw away. I opened my laptop. The dining room lights dimmed automatically as I activated the holographic projector I'd brought. A shimmering, three-dimensional lattice of light particles bloomed in the air above the table, spinning in a complex, synchronized dance. This is quantum stability, I explained, my voice narrating the display. Coherent quantum states, maintained indefinitely at room temperature. No decoherence. No massive, power-hungry cooling systems. This isn't a theory anymore. It's an engineering reality. Olivia stared, her mouth agape. But the progress reports, they said your results were inconsistent, that you were years away. The reports you were allowed to see were decoys, I said, allowing myself a small, wry smile. Intentionally flawed data sets. A tactic I learned from your division, actually. A way to protect valuable work from corporate espionage. My father finally found his voice, a strained rasp. This changes nothing. The company bylaws state. Oh, I know exactly what the bylaws state, I interrupted. I looked him directly in the eye. I know, for example, about Article 7, Paragraph 4. The Founders Clause, which my grandfather insisted on. It stipulates that any attempt by the CEO to sell or divest a core technology division without a unanimous board vote and the explicit consent of the head of R&D constitutes a gross breach of fiduciary duty. I paused. The penalty for which is the immediate transfer of the CEO's voting shares to an executive trust, pending a full board review. He stared at me, comprehension dawning like a slow-motion horror film. That clause hasn't been relevant in 40 years. It became relevant the moment you pushed that paper in front of me, I said. My lawyer, Mr. Larson, filed the motion with the board's independent directors an hour ago. Congratulations, Dad. You just retired. I closed my laptop, the hologram vanishing into nothing. I stood and collected my bag. Olivia, I said, turning to my sister, who looked as if she'd seen a ghost. Clean out your office. Corporate espionage and intellectual property theft will be the first items on the agenda at tomorrow's emergency board meeting. I have 5 years of receipts. I left them there, frozen amidst the ruins of their perfect dinner. As I stepped outside, the crisp night air felt clean and new. My phone buzzed again, another offer, another string of impossible zeros. But I wasn't thinking about the money anymore. That was just leverage. The real work, rebuilding my grandfather's company from the inside out, was just beginning. The Bennett Tech boardroom the next morning was a theater of corporate anxiety. 14 directors sat around the obsidian oval table, their faces a mixture of confusion, concern, and predatory curiosity. My father occupied the head seat, though it no longer looked like a throne, it looked like a dock. I took the seat directly opposite him, placing my laptop on the table and folding my hands. I hadn't slept, but I was fueled by a clarity that was more potent than caffeine. This emergency meeting is now in session, the corporate secretary announced nervously. My father spoke first, his voice strained but attempting its old authority. I will not stand for this ridiculous, theatrical power grab by my son. We'll begin with the facts. I cut in, my tone even and professional. I nodded to Mr. Larson, who stood and began distributing thick, bound folders to each director. In your hands, you will find documentation confirming 3 things. First, that the 12 patents related to Project Chimera, the project you knew as the quantum stability algorithm, are registered solely in my name and funded by a private trust. Second, you'll find the legal motion invoking Article 7 of the company charter, confirming the transfer of voting control. And third, you'll find the signed offer from Global Dynamics, proof of an attempt to sell company assets without board approval. This is absurd. Olivia snapped from her seat beside my father. He's a researcher, not a businessman. He has no standing. On the contrary, I said, turning to the room's main display screen. I clicked a button, and the screen lit up with a complex flowchart of financial transactions, project code names, and patent filings. For the past 3 years, I have tracked every instance of IP theft originating from Olivia's division. Projects developed in our smaller labs, mysteriously shelved, only to reappear months later under a new name with her name listed as project lead. A murmur went through the room. I brought up emails, server logs, and memos, a digital trail of breadcrumbs she had been too arrogant to cover. It was all there, a meticulous record of stolen credit and buried careers. She didn't just steal ideas, I said softly. She stole futures. Olivia's face was a mask of pale fury. You set me up. I collected data, I replied. There's a difference. Mr. Chun, the unflappable head of the audit committee, leaned forward. Mr. Bennett. Ethan, what is your proposal? I stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the city. My grandfather built this company to invent the future, not to repackage the present. We've lost our way, chasing short-term gains while penalizing real innovation. That ends today. I pressed a button on my remote. The boardroom doors opened, and a dozen men and women filed in, looking nervous but resolute. I recognized each of them. Dr. Eris Thorne, a leading mind in quantum materials, fired by Olivia for insubordination. Lena Petrova, a software architect whose work Olivia had claimed as her own. They were the brilliant minds the company had discarded. These are your new department heads, I announced to the stun board. The real innovators of Bennett Tech. They are all being reinstated, with back pay and expanded authority. You can't just, my father began. I can, I said, turning back to him. And I already have. I nodded to the head of security, who had entered discreetly and now stood behind my sister's chair. Olivia, I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. The federal investigators are waiting for you in the lobby to discuss wire fraud and patent infringement. I suggest you cooperate. She glared at me, her eyes burning with hatred. You're destroying this family. I'm saving this company, I replied. The door closed behind her with a hollow click. For a few long seconds, no one moved. The hum of the air system filled the void where my sister's voice had been. One of the directors, a man who had always laughed at her jokes, cleared his throat, as if testing whether it was safe to speak again. Another adjusted his glasses, eyes darting between me and my father, unsure which way the wind was blowing now. I didn't speak. I wanted them to sit with it, to feel the weight of what loyalty to mediocrity had cost them. My father's hand was trembling against the table. For a second, I almost pitied him. This was the man who'd taught me how to tie a tie, how to look people in the eye during a presentation, how to speak with authority. And now, every lesson he'd ever given me was being used against him. He opened his mouth as if to say something, then closed it. I watched the realization cross his face. He wasn't in control anymore. A faint vibration buzzed across the table, someone's phone. No one dared to check it. Every person in that room understood what had shifted. The hierarchy had inverted. The dismissed scientist had just rewritten the family business. I took a slow breath, letting the silence stretch a heartbeat longer before I broke it. After she was escorted out, a heavy silence filled the room. I returned to the main screen. Now, let me introduce you to the real project. The display changed to show schematics and live footage of a facility no one in that room knew existed. An underground campus miles from headquarters, shielded from all forms of electronic snooping. It was codenamed Project Phoenix. For 5 years, the basement lab was a decoy, I explained. A place to generate flawed data for Olivia's spies to steal. The real work happened here. I brought up the performance logs. 3 weeks ago, our quantum system achieved supremacy in cryptographic cracking. 2 weeks ago, it solved a protein folding problem that would take the world's fastest supercomputer a decade. And in the last 48 hours, it has modeled a carbon capture method so efficient it could reverse atmospheric damage within a generation. Phones began to vibrate around the table as directors got alerts about Bennett Tech's stock, which was beginning a near-vertical climb on the pre-market. Dr. Thorne stepped forward. "Using Ethan's algorithm," he said, his voice resonating with quiet confidence, "we built a stable, room-temperature quantum computer. The prototype is the size of a briefcase. It runs on a standard wall outlet." The silence that followed was one of pure, unadulterated shock. I walked to the head of the table and stopped behind the chair my father still occupied. "Here is what happens now," I said to the board. "We are restructuring, effective immediately. We will pivot back to being a research-first institution. We will license our encryption to allies, partner with medical institutions, and fund pure science." I slid one last folder across the table to my father. "That is your retirement package. It's generous. If you refuse it, you can explain your actions to the SEC." He stared at the papers, his hands trembling. The titan of industry looked like a tired old man. "You planned all of this," he whispered. "You taught me that in business, you either anticipate the moves of your opponent or you become a casualty," I said. I listened. I took the head chair. For the first time, the room felt like it held promise instead of just power. "Welcome to the new Bennett Tech," I said. "The work starts now." In the weeks that followed, the company underwent a seismic shift. The stuffy executive floor was torn down and replaced with open-plan innovation hubs. Glass walls replaced mahogany doors. The culture of fear was replaced by a palpable buzz of excitement. My mother appeared at my office one afternoon, looking smaller and more fragile than I had ever seen her. She placed a small wooden box on my desk. "I found this in your father's study," she said. "It's from your grandfather." Inside was a letter, written in his familiar, steady script, and a bundle of my old childhood drawings, pages filled with impossible machines and sprawling equations. The letter was dated a week before he died. "Ethan," it read, "never let small men convince you that your dreams are too big. They're not afraid you'll fail. They're afraid you'll succeed. Build the world you see in your head. The rest will follow." My mother looked at the framed patents on my wall, my new ones next to his old ones. "He would have been so proud of you." "He knew," I said quietly. "He left me the map." The true turning point, the moment that eclipsed all the boardroom drama, came a month later. It was a call from a research hospital we'd partnered with. A doctor, her voice thick with emotion, told me their team had used our platform to model a personalized therapy for a young patient with a rare, aggressive cancer. The conventional treatments had failed. "Our old models showed no viable pathways," she explained. "Your system found a unique protein interaction we never would have seen. We adjusted the treatment. This morning, the tumor markers have dropped by 60%. I stood in my office, looking out at the city, the phone pressed to my ear. All the anger, the years of feeling unseen, the bitter satisfaction of revenge, it all dissolved in that moment, replaced by something clean and profound. We had built something that did more than make money or settle scores. It saved lives. After the call ended, I didn't move. I just stood there, staring out over the city lights until they blurred. Somewhere down there, in a hospital room I'd never see, a machine powered by our work had given someone another day. Maybe a week. Maybe a lifetime. I thought of my grandfather's voice again, gravelly but gentle. "Build the world you see in your head." I wondered if he'd known it would take me tearing down the one my family had built first. I walked through the Phoenix lab, past rows of humming servers, the faint scent of ozone and cold metal in the air. Every screen glowed with purpose. I ran my hand across the casing of the first prototype, its warmth steady under my palm. For the first time, the sound of the machines didn't feel mechanical. It felt alive. That evening, I called an all-hands meeting. I stood before the employees, not as a CEO on a stage, but as a fellow researcher on the floor. I told them the story from the hospital, protecting the patient's anonymity. I told them that this would be our new measure of success, not the stock price, but the quiet victories that give people more time with their families. "The acquisition offers are still coming in," I concluded, my voice echoing in the crowded atrium. "Numbers with more zeros than any of us can comprehend. But Project Phoenix is not for sale. Its purpose isn't to make a few people wealthier. It's to make humanity better. If you're here for a quick payout, this is no longer the right place for you. But if you're here to do the best work of your lives, for the right reasons, then welcome home. A quiet but powerful wave of applause filled the space. It wasn't the roar of a crowd. It was the sound of 1,000 people finding their purpose. Later that night, alone in the silence of the Phoenix lab, I powered on the small, unassuming prototype. Its indicator lights blinked a steady, hopeful green in the darkness. We had done it. We had built the future the hard way. And it was just the beginning.